just the fact that you are tuning in to this, something like this, but this, it's an indication, it's evidence for you that you are, on some level, a cooperative participant in your shift, your quantum leap. You can kind of use shift and quantum leap interchangeably in some ways, but it's like I said before, it's kind of this, it's like a nesting effect, right? You can have a series of quantum leaps. You can have one bigger quantum leap that's comprised of a couple of jumps. And then that whole thing can form, the basis or the stepping off or the stepping stone for then another one, right? This is all, we're talking about infinities here. But in general, what we're talking about is significant change in a short period of time as we think we know it, and with deliberate choice and conscious intent, right? So it's not a random thing. It's not a I hope kind of thing. It's kind of it's an art, right? This is becoming an artistic expression. So the fact that you are a cooperative component is significant because everyone's going through a lot of shift and change. It's been accelerating for, especially since that kind of 2012 turning point. And it's not slowing down, it's accelerating. So the amount of change that we're processing in, let's say, like a 6-month period is kind of like the amount of change we were processing in a 6-year period 10 years ago or 20 years ago, right? It's that. And then, a couple of years from now, as we get into, sort of approaching 2030, it's going to be this really kind of instantaneous thing. I mean, and that's already accessible. It's already available. But it's the kind of thing that it takes some real focus and some real working with the process. So this phase that we're going to talk about here, I like to call liftoff. It's kind of where we take the things we talked about in the launch phase, and now we amp those up. We start to add in additional sort of power tools and use of power tools. And this is where you really start to see evidence, right? You probably started to see a little bit of evidence throughout the launch phase. You started to have some synchronicities, you started to find some synergies, you started to find some things happened a little easier than what typically I'm used to in some form or another, right? A couple things came together, a couple things lined up. There was this nice kind of a flow that happened, and it might be an isolated thing here and there. But you start to notice these little things. Oh, I met this really nice person, and they had some interesting, useful information for me, and they also had some opportunity. And it was a really good opportunity that was a good fit for me. And so I took it. And it's not a huge thing. But it's actually, in retrospect, a pretty key component. Because then from there, it enables other things and other things. And you can't really see it at the time. And the rational mind is getting it all confused about it. And it's okay. But that kind of a dynamic starts to happen more frequently. Right? It's kind of like we talked about in the last one about the refresh and having more change per refresh, more differentiation, more apparent change per refresh. So instead of having these kind of synchronicities where things line up over a period of a few days, maybe, and that happens, once a month, maybe you get a whole bunch of things happening over a few days, and that's starting to happen like once a week. Just, in simple terms. And this is when you start getting into liftoff, because it's not, as much as it's somewhat similar to launching a space shuttle, it's not exactly, right? No metaphor is exact. It will always break down if you want to get too into the weeds. But the quantum leap is really when you start developing momentum, right? It's a momentum thing. You get a positive feedback loop that starts to gain momentum, and it starts to move, right? It's like, when you get going on your bike and you start changing gears, and all of a sudden you're going really fast and you're not pedaling very fast, right? But at the beginning you're pedaling fast and you're not really going very fast because you're in a faster gear, right? You need that torque to kind of get you going, and you're working at that, and you're not really going anywhere. And then all of a sudden you're gearing up and gearing up and gearing up, and now the bike's going really fast and you're just pedaling very slowly. That's what starts to happen. And so in this liftoff phase, you need to keep doing the things that you've been doing, right? And even if, let's say, you're watching this and you're like, my life's already pretty good. My life's good. Fantastic. However, remember, there will always be challenges. You didn't come into this realm, into this incarnation, to just kind of cruise through. And if there were a lot of really difficult lives that your higher self has spun off, maybe this is kind of one that's more of a vacation where things are a lot easier. Okay, but that's rare, and that's a whole other thing. You're probably not tuning into this if that's the case. You're not. Just things are so easy, you're just cruising along, right? So if you're in a good place in general, your health was good, things are good in your home, relationship, work, you're happy, like things are good, great. Don't become complacent, because you're going to have challenges. There's always going to be a challenge. Depending what you signed up for in this particular incarnation, there's always going to be challenge. Always. Now, it can be struggle and horror, which generally comes when you're completely unconscious and you're using the rational mind to do things it wasn't designed for, and the ego gets all distorted and takes over and starts sort of running you into walls. And you're like, why is this stuff always happening to me? Right? And then you get depression and you get whatever. But if things are going really well, don't lose sight of what matters. Like, make sure you are still giving yourself, which you must have been, right? Because if you're tuning into this and things are going well, then you must have a pretty good routine, or at least a pretty decent rhythm. You've got some balance where you're giving yourself the time, giving yourself the space to do self-care, to be present, to be in your body, to be taking care of the little things, right? So I would just say, make sure you keep doing that, because as challenges do come up, and they don't have to be huge, crazy challenges, but as challenges come up, you want to just be really anchored in your approach, anchored in your presence, so that you're not getting knocked out of your center and flying into reaction and overreaction, and then, things can kind of devolve, right? Things can deteriorate. So, but for everyone else who's kind of, some things are working here, some things aren't really working out so here, and I'm a little bit annoyed about this, and it'd be better if that, which I think I sense and is kind of the majority of people. Not that people are necessarily that conscious and articulate about all the aspects of their life. They're kind of just moving along, right? They've got some just patterns and unconscious situations that are just, they live with it, right? Accept it. They don't love it, they complain about it, and they just try to just, have some fun here and there, and then talk about the struggles and the dramas with their friends and stuff like they always do, right? And that just perpetuates things. So as you get into lift-off phase, assuming you're one of those people that's kind of, some things are good, some things are not good. Or maybe some things are not good at all, and there's not much that's really going well. There's a range, right? You need to maintain that ability to get still, to be in the body, to get present, to breathe, to get yourself into alignment, get yourself into that state, accessing your power, out of the distraction, out of the noise. You need to give yourself that space, that time, every day, throughout the day. The more you practice it, the more you rehearse, because eventually, ultimately, you're going to be living, present in every refresh. You're not going to go unconscious into the sort of unconscious trance stupor where you're just reacting and wandering around and checking your feed and opening the fridge and just stumbling around. Like, you're going to go sort of in and out of that, present and conscious, and then not very present, not very conscious, and whatever. But more and more, you're going to step out of that unconsciousness, and more you're going to step into your presence in an ongoing way, in a continuous flow of consciousness. And it's just going to be this question of, what's in my well-being? What needs my attention in this moment? That's going to be this underlying curiosity and perspective that you're going to have. And a lot of times it'll be, there's not necessarily anything to do. And you're not going to just be looking for things to do. You're going to be allowing for impulse, for inspiration, which will come along synchronistically as you are living in your presence. And so part of the lift-off phase is to continue to do the things you were doing, but now not just being present, not just being in alignment, right? That's important. But then from there, you want to have been developing the ability to elevate yourself, your vibrational state, elevate yourself frequentially as you raise your vibration, as you feel. Right? Remember, feeling is something you can only do in present time. You can think about a hypothetical future situation and how that might make you feel. But you can't feel in the future and you can't feel in the past. You can only feel in the present. So if you're feeling elevated emotion in present time, you're primarily broadcasting and expressing gamma brainwaves, right? If you're really happy, and you can just be happy for no reason at all, but if you're happy, you're really, really thankful, really appreciative, right? And for no reason at all, just because it's the enjoyment of just being in that state. Because everything you do Everything you go off to do and accomplish and everything, you're always doing it because you have some belief that it's going to make you feel good. Everything you do, right? You don't go out to a party or out to go hang out with friends, or your kids don't go to the park just because something to do that they're not going to enjoy. Kids want to go to the park because they know it's fun. They're going to enjoy it. They're going to feel the enjoyment and the excitement. But you don't need a park, and you don't need a social event, and you don't need entertainment to feel that stuff, right? That's that backwards thing we talked about. In your presence, in your stillness, you want to get into those feelings and hold them. Hold them. Breathing and feeling elevated emotion for extended periods of time. This is where things really will start to take off, because everything's vibration, everything's frequency. When you get yourself into high vibrational state, frequentially elevated state, the kinds of thoughts that you have access to are at a whole new level of frequency and harmonics. They are, just think about it in terms of sound, they are more music and less noise. Much more music and much less noise. So if your thoughts are like music, right, those are the seeds of manifestation, and your body is in alignment, right? You're dealing with all kinds of now different layers and types of energy. Thoughts are electrical. There's electrical energy in your thoughts. Your emotions are magnetic, right? That's an interdimensional force. And now you're dealing with magnetics, you're dealing with electricity. So photons respond, are manipulated by magnetics. Like, there's a magnetic structuring on this planet. If you leave the planet and you go into space, you have to take the magnetics with you, or else your biology kind of starts to fall apart. There's a magnetic structuring to you. You have a North Pole and a South Pole, just like the Earth has a North Pole and a South Pole. And that's the magnetics. The sun has magnetics. When the magnetics of the sun overlaps with the magnetics of the Earth, what happens? It's inductance, right? Two overlapping fields, what do you get? You get fireworks, or aurora borealis, right? You get a light show. That's magnetics. That's what you're seeing. Interference, overlapping of magnetic fields. Right? Your DNA, that's what it is. It's a magnetic field. You don't see it. No one really ever sees a magnetic field. People don't even really understand magnetics, but they kind of defy the laws of physics that we know, don't they? Right? If you stick a magnet on a fridge, it will hold on to the fridge for forever. You don't have to plug it in. You don't have to charge it up. You don't have to go add gas, whatever. There's a force there. It's a perpetual force. And magnetics is fundamental to your structuring. When you have your feeling in a alignment, it's where you have a structuring, energetically structuring the magnetics, which is your emotion. Magnetics and electricity, electromagnetics, there's an interplay there. Right, your feelings and your thoughts in a coherent, powerful broadcast, that starts to accelerate the materialization process, the realization process, the manifestation process, to reflect that coherence and that alignment. It's like that music, right? Your manifestation is going to correspond to a symphony as opposed to noise. So your manifestation, your reality is going to materialize in a way that's coherent, and harmonic. When there's a lot of noise being broadcast, it's going to manifest as what? Disturbance, inconvenience, something maybe kind of cool over here, and then something that kind of is not so cool over there. It's going to be up and down. It's going to be all over the place, and things are just going to seem random. So this is kind of fundamental understanding, is you need to be able to not only get still and get present and get into alignment, right? That was the wax on, wax off practice from the pre-launch phase and even the launch phase, but in the liftoff phase, you have to be giving yourself the time and the space to run those frequentially higher vibrations, broadcasting in a frequentially higher, at a frequentially higher level. You have to be in that state more and more. I mean, you can start to make it your walking around state. But then what's going to happen is those synchronicities are going to keep accelerating. The opportunities are going to start to show up that are just like, you're going to have these kind of no-brainer situations. Stuff you just can't plan for. Right? Some people think you need a life plan, you need a business plan. That doesn't work. Because that's all rational mind stuff. You can put out a framework or a template, you can, but you better be very flexible. Because how things manifest, your higher mind and the universe, they don't necessarily follow the steps. Things don't come in the sequence that you expect. So if you're getting something that you weren't expecting, don't dismiss it. It could be something you really need a little later, but it needed to come now, so you've got it in hand. It's like if you're doing a puzzle and you find the corner piece, you don't just toss it back into the puzzle, do you? Oh, I found a corner piece. It's a 1,000-piece puzzle. It's hard to find those corner pieces, and those are the things you need to really start with a strategy to get the whole puzzle done. You find the corner piece, you put it aside. You don't just look at it and say, oh, I don't know where this goes. And you hold on to it. You find another corner piece. Okay, good. Now I got two. I don't need them necessarily right now. I don't even know which ones they are yet, but I put them aside. And then still maybe continue with the puzzle analogy. When you find the edge pieces, you put those aside too, right? Because there aren't that many of them. And if you work from the corners and the edges all the way around and you frame the puzzle and you work to the center, it becomes a lot easier. That's a quantum approach. If you just start picking up random pieces in a 1,000-piece puzzle and you look at it, I wonder where this one goes, you'll never get the puzzle done. But that's how people live. That's how we're taught. That's how we're trained, because we completely ignore any concept of the quantum. It's a linear thing. Where does this one piece go? I don't know. And you spend your whole life basically with one piece trying to figure it out. So things will start to show up, and if it starts to show up and you're going to start to feel it, like, I should pay attention to that. Like this one time it happened to me, it was just somebody told me about somebody that they met that had just done something. Not significant, but I got this sense to like, just notice that. I don't know why, but I don't know why I even asked the question. Where was he? What did he do? But that made such a huge difference. Not in the moment, and not even a week later, but a couple months later made a huge difference. It started a sequence and a progression of, it's like getting back to the breadcrumbs. You're going to start to see more breadcrumbs. Don't dismiss them. Because before you know it, you're going to be kind of free and clear of some of these things that you thought were such a big deal, that were disturbances or disruptions. When you don't give them any focus anymore, they fall away. They peel off. And you just keep going back to what matters. What matters is my vibration. What matters is what I'm broadcasting. What matters is what I'm talking about. What am I talking about? I have my recordings. Make more recordings. Make more recordings. You can't have enough, really. You can't have enough. Okay, sometimes, yeah, I've made 2 or 3 in a day, and that's enough for now. Let me go spend some time listening to them. Let me go off and do a couple other things. Let me go get some exercise, go for a walk or whatever. I might take them with me. I might even make some more. But you really can't. Like, I've been doing this for such a long time. And it never gets to a point where it's like, okay, yeah, I don't have to do that anymore. As soon as you stop doing that, that's when it's easy to start getting distracted and start getting pulled off. You always want to have that coming back to center. And the constant kind of reminder. And so that it's a way of life, and it's in everything that you do. Right? Whether you're cooking, you're doing things very consciously and deliberately. Slowly, right? Slower you go, the faster you arrive. And so another concept that I bring in at this juncture is the concept of time jumping. And I think I'm probably going to dedicate a whole video to time jumping. Because time jumping, the reality is that there are these entities called timelines, and they do all the work. And all you really need to do is set your energy. Okay? I'm just putting that out there. We don't have to dive into that right now. But that will make sense more and more to you as we go further along. But time jumping, remember, there's only now. So it's only time jumping from our perspective, right? We think about, okay, I'm jumping into a future scenario. But it's really just another perspective on now. You're shifting energetically into a different perspective on now. For simplicity's sake, let's call it a future scenario, right? So let's say, and this is what actors do in rehearsals to some extent, not necessarily as consciously, but if you're doing a rehearsal and you're just doing the rehearsal, let's say you're on stage and you're doing a rehearsal and everyone's doing their rehearsal, it's good practice. But then you do a dress rehearsal. And why do you do a dress rehearsal? Because it makes it more real. It makes it feel more like the actual performance. Now, if you do a dress rehearsal and you pretend, right? Pretend is really important because, it's like Einstein said, imagination is the preview for life's coming attractions. He wasn't kidding. Like, nothing he ever said was kidding, really. So there's always something, worth listening to in there. He's coming from somewhere, right? There's something profound going on. Everything that manifests at some point has come through the thinking. It was thought. There's thought. Thoughts are like the seeds of manifestation. So, if you're on stage in a dress rehearsal and you're imagining an audience there and you're performing as though there's an audience there and you get the sense, you feel the feelings of there's an audience there, and it feels very real because of you're imagining it, making it feel very real. Your body can't tell the difference. Your body can't tell the difference. It just knows the vibration. So when you imagine something and you feel it, you visualize it, you feel it, you think it, your body doesn't know the difference because your body only is in present time. Everything is present for your body. So everything's present, right? So you imagine, you rehearse. You're projecting your consciousness into another point in time, another perspective on now. That's what you're doing. If you're on stage rehearsing, imagining the audience is there, you're projecting your consciousness into the actual performance on the night of the show. You're projecting your consciousness into that. And you can do that with everything. You can do, now it's easier to do because in a rehearsal, you have lines, right? You're memorizing your lines or your song or whatever it is, right? You already know that stuff. So you're just restating it because you've memorized it, you know it. So that makes it easier, but you can do it. And this is where it gets really powerful. Remember the stream of consciousness that we were recording. Now imagine you're projecting your consciousness into a future scenario, and the stream of consciousness is flowing in your recording. So as an example, let's say you are a real estate agent and you time jump into a scenario where what? You just closed a big deal. You just got a big commission check. You just finished the month with your best performance ever. What does that look like? It looks something like this. And this is the state. And this is the recording. You're recording this and you're saying, wow, what an amazing month. I had such good clients. I've got these clients that have integrity and means. There's this sense of trust and well-being. These deals just came together effortlessly. There was this underlying respect and there was this synchronicity. We just had this flow. The numbers worked out. The locations worked out. The timings worked out. And they're really happy. They've already started sending me referrals. I've already got appointments lined up with these referrals. They were happy to sign. They were happy to bring me a certified check for the deposit. They're really happy and they want to take me out for dinner. Now, I can keep going. We could go on and we could expand it to all kinds of different directions, but the essence of it is to be in the energy of what just happened in that time jump, right? So that's kind of like a rehearsal, but there's no, I mean, you could write the lines, you could write that stuff, and then you could speak it and record it and listen to it. But the more you can get into, right, time jump into that reality, which you might say, oh, it's imagination. Yes, but remember, the imagination is everything, right? That's the seeds of manifestation. So it's almost like you could call it in the cynical, you could say you're faking it, okay, but it's pretend, it's imagination. And this is why if you look into the teachings of Rudolf Steiner and you ever look at Waldorf schools, they don't rush kids into learning alphabet and learning numbers and manipulating numbers and math and reading. That's going to come. But they spend as much as they can in those first, in particular, those first 6 years, where the kids are the brain is in a theta state. It's like they're almost like this dream-like state. You can't treat a 4-year-old like a 10-year-old. They're two different brain states. 10 years old, their brain state is more in an alpha beta. When they're 4, their brain is in theta. It's a dream-like state. They don't have the filters. They don't have the linearity. They don't have the rational. Yes, they can understand some things, but time is very malleable for them. It's a lot of imagination. We lose it and we forget that we've lost it as we get older. But especially even from the time you're like 2 and 3 and 4, so much that's available then, you lose it. And so in Waldorf, what they do with kids from those early years, especially up till 6, is they focus as much as they can on the imagination, on developing the imagination, and preserving the imagination, because the propensity for humans is to lose it, to get rushed into linearity, rushed into numbers, rushed into reading. There's no rush for that. They do singing, a lot of singing. They do painting and coloring and drawing. They don't do coloring books. There's no coloring in the lines. It's blank piece of paper. Watercolors. It's very specific, even in terms of the motion in going across the center line of the body. There's depth to that. It's building a foundation. It's not rushing kids into reading and adding. I mean, how many people do you know love math? How many people do you know, oh yeah, I was really good at math? Not many. Why? Because it's taught so poorly. Not to be judgmental, but the way that it's taught doesn't resonate. It's not relevant. It's dry, it's flat, it's single dimensional. People don't absorb it. It's boring. No one likes it. It's frustrating. It can be taught using imagination, using creativity, using a much more creative and imaginative teaching method. And that's what happens in something like Waldorf. And so the kids have what's called deep learning, where everything it's like quantum learning, because it's not surface. Every layer, as you go down and down, or as you have been building up and up, depending on how you want to look at it, right? There is meaning, and there is a level of understanding and experimentation. Right? Kids learn best when they get to experiment. As an example, the classic way of teaching in science is to teach people the experiment, teach the kids, here's what's going to happen, and now let's go do it. Kind of a spoiler, right? Here's what's going to happen. Yeah, who cares? Now let's go do it. Okay, we did it. But in Waldorf, it's, what do you think would happen if we took this and that and this and did this with it? Let's see what that would look like. And the kids are like, I don't know. Okay, what do you think's going to happen? I don't know. They're excited. And they do it. And all of a sudden they get an explosion, or they get smoke, or they get different colors, or they get a whatever. They get a reaction. They get something happens. And then the next day, they go back and they revisit it, and they ask the kids, what happened? And they're all jumping out of their seat to talk about the experience. And then they talk about it, and they examine it, and they explore it, and wonder why, and then from there, the teacher draws out the principles, draws out the theories and the concepts, and in some cases, the laws, right? If we're talking about laws of physics, but the underlying causes of why something happened the way that it did. It's kind of working it backwards. It's like Waldorf is teaching from the inside out. Right? It's drawing out the kids' creativity and their interests and their tendencies. What do you think innovation is, right? Innovation, we go to school and we're not engaging our curiosity and our creativity hardly at all, right? It's all learn this, here it's on the board, copy it, memorize it. There's no creativity there. And then we're supposed to go into the world and, be employees, fine. But you're going to come up with innovation? What's innovation? Innovation is creativity, putting things together in ways that hasn't been put together before. Creativity. It's from the imagination. Everything comes from the imagination. Right? That's why we have periods in history where nothing really happened, because everyone was just using their rational mind. And the rational mind only knows what it knows. It doesn't have any creativity. So inside out learning as opposed to outside in learning. It's the complete opposite. And so we're doing the same kind of thing right now. Right? Living from creation, living from creativity. We're creators. We're living from creativity, not from definition. Right? Not from, here's what they told me I should do and I should know, and I'm now going to go do that. I'm going to get married and have kids and get a house and then retire and travel and die. There you go. Right? That's definition. Creativity is like, I have no limits. Imagine. Right? And then live from the imagination. It's also called, it's referred to as creating from the unknown, right? If you ever watched any Joe Dispenza, he talks about creating from the unknown. You're at your best when you're creating from the unknown. That's creativity. There's no unknown in definition. It's just trying to find the best example of what's going to fit into the definitions that you were given. Creating from the known, what are you going to end up with? Nothing exciting. Nothing surprising, right? Just the stuff that you were told you should probably get. I mean, that's not living. It's kind of living, but not really. So, this is the essence of liftoff. It's seeing the sort of the subtleties in what the patterns we have of thinking and beliefs, and having largely cleared them, largely disintegrated them at this point. Once you've done that, things really just start to take off. And so, like I said before, in terms of time, where it feels like, something that your rational mind would think is, we would need a year to do that, and why would we do that? And if we were to do that, then this could happen, and what if this happens, and what? There's no what if. Living from what if is linear, it's not quantum, and it's going to it would undermine the whole process. So when people say, well, I need a backup plan, something to fall back on. No, you don't. Because if you give focus to that, you're going to need it. It's just giving yourself an out. It's like talking in terms of trying, right? It's like Yoda says, there's no try, there's just do. Now, it might take you a few starts and stops. It might take some experimentation. Might take going down a path that doesn't work out, but it's not that it didn't work out. It's that you got the information to then now prepare you for the next stage or for the next step, or it's going to help you solidify yourself on the path. It's going to give you something that you needed. It's not failure. It's like when I first got into politics, the first two elections, the first one I had no hope of winning. The second one I had a chance of winning, but I lost narrowly, like really close. It was like 1 or 2%. But I just realized, like, it all depends on your perspective. right? It just all depends on your perspective. I didn't feel like I lost. I felt like, okay, that was good. And I created so many relationships in that particular go round. I met so many people. I learned things. I learned things about myself. I created a familiarity. And when the next election cycle came around later, I was so much better for it. And I was so much more in command of what I was doing. And then there was more synchronicity. I met certain people at the right time that enabled me to have better funding, better literature, better science. It was a process, right? It's a process. And so I didn't look at the first two elections like they were failures. They were huge contributing factors. The first one, we knew we had no chance, but that's where I learned all the fundamentals. And the next one, where I almost won, I learned, I refined the process. I learned even more. I got more efficient in what I was doing, and I developed some momentum. I had developed relationships, and those became people that were supportive going forward and offering, like, volunteering for the next time around. So the next time around, I had a lot more momentum. I had a lot more information. I was a lot more efficient and effective. And so when I won that election, it felt like the whole period from all those three, it was like a culmination, right? So it happened in stages. I wasn't meant to win the first time or the second time. And so that's kind of how you need to look at failure. Failure, like, if you've been reading U Squared, it talks about inviting failure. It's not really failure. It's exploration. You explore something, you experiment with something. It doesn't work out the way you thought, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You're going to get something out of that if you want to, and that's going to contribute. That's going to enable you to jump farther and with more precision, ultimately. So, I'm going to wrap up here. The takeaways. Time jumping, start to consider that as a concept. I'm going to do another video on that at some point. But really getting into character. Pretend, imagine, enhance your ability all the time to be more present. Using the breath, using the writing, using the recordings. You can never do too many. Refining and refining and refining. A couple other things. Make sure you're getting out in nature. Spend some time in nature. Connect with the earth, right? Do some earthing. Get out. Especially if you're in the city. It's really hard if you're in the city. But get yourself to a creek, to a park. Get yourself surrounded by trees. You need that energy. Right? Get some sun in your face and in your eyes. Hydrate. Structured water. Learn to structure your water. Hydrate with structured water. Do some experimentation with breath work. Once you've done it a few times, it's easy to do it and sprinkle in a little bit of breath work throughout your day. A little bit goes a long way. It moves stagnant energy. And stagnant energy, you can move it, it gets cleared, but it's just, takes, sometimes it feels like it's never all gonna go, and that's fine. So you wanna just be working on it. It's like gardening, right? You can never get all the weeds. You get all the weeds, the next day there might be another one or two. I mean, I love all plants, but a weed is really just a plant out of place, right? So if you have a garden and you have certain weeds or plants in place, they can't coexist there. So they have to be removed. And so it's that ongoing thing. It's gardening. It's tending to yourself, your field, your space, your bodies, your vibration, tending to it, being aware of it, being conscious of it. Okay, the next one is going to be on landing and settling, and just some of the key considerations when you find yourself having made a significant leap, like a real quantum leap. Things you're going to want to then bring into your expanded awareness, just part of the perspective you're going to want to have when you get there, to keep things on track and to keep a productive perspective, so you don't have what you might call a relapse, or you don't fall off of where you were, you don't get complacent, and you don't make yourself prone to a major kind of a setback. Because that can happen. You know, you can get too carried away. It's too much fun and it's starting to feel too good, and then you just kind of, you lose perspective and you don't give yourself the benefit of getting present, the benefit of maintaining what you've done, and you start to lose and fall back. It's like when, you know, an athlete or an artist gets a little bit too full of themselves, right? They tend to what happens? They tend to suffer some kind of a setback, an injury, or an album that's a flop or something like that, right? You want to stay grounded and you want to stay humble. Okay, see you next time.